Everyone couldn't understand why my parents didn't want me to continue schooling, despite everything being presented to me free of charge. I told everyone that I wasn't going to let go of the scholarship. Then you must choose. You either forego that scholarship and every plan to further your education, or join us and become a great farmer. Just look at us. We went to school, but the system failed us, and we never got decent jobs. Trust me, schooling won't take you anywhere. I refused the latter. Before everyone, they shamelessly asked me to go home, get my things, and leave their house. That's unfair. Where do you want a young boy like him to go?
We don't care. If he's not going to listen to us, that only means he's grown enough. And a grown man should look after himself.
We can't have a son like him in our house. He'll kill us one day. In tears, I returned home and packed a small bag. Hi, my name is Zane. I was born in the countryside, and my parents were farmers. They made their living from selling crops and animals. We also fed on them. My parents weren't fans of education. It was confusing because they'd gone to school. In fact, my dad had a certificate in business, while my mom had studied nursing. It always remained a mystery to me how they both ended up being farmers. Since they weren't fans of education, they didn't think it was important for me to go to school. They believed it was important to be educated on the farm instead. It wasn't until I was age 3 before my parents finally allowed me to go to school. No, it wasn't out of their own will. It was because our neighbors were gossiping about it. While other kids went to school, I was at the farm. The other parents thought it was stupid and unwise on the part of my parents. They'd even be bold enough to confront them about it.
Don't you think he's too young to be a farmer? What is he going to do when he grows and his peers are smarter than him?
I can't believe you're both intentionally destroying his future. He can be educated and still learn to farm. You both are going to make life so difficult for the poor thing.
It didn't stop there. As if planned, whenever the women came across my parents, they would remind them of the need for education. I became a hot topic in the whole town. My dad's friends weren't having it either. They were also farmers, but they didn't deny their kids education. Whenever they hung out, all they would talk about was their kids at school. My dad would sit quietly, unable to say anything. I was too young and didn't understand what was going on. But now, I feel grateful to those people. After months of them talking to my parents, I was finally registered to school 2 months before my 4th birthday. I felt so excited on my first day. I saw new faces, new places, and learned new things. It was like a different world, and at the end of the day, I really didn't want to return home. You'd have thought my parents would make me leave farming for school. Well, nope. I still had to farm. It continued until I was 15. By then, I'd grown into a very handsome and intelligent teenager. My school was so proud and confident in me. Whenever the school had a competition, I was always the first to be picked. Of course, I never failed to bring back the best of the trophies. I didn't stop farming. In fact, I'd gotten so good that my dad was able to leave some of the farming to me and attend to other things. I wasn't complaining. I loved farming just as much as I loved being in school. My intelligence was famous around the town. There were always so many loud cheers whenever I entered venues to compete. Those gave me confidence to be myself and bring my town and the school respect. I wrote my final exams for high school a month after my 15th birthday. I wasn't even a tiny bit scared about failing, as I was sure I would pass. One day, while awaiting my results, I saw a few of my classmates running toward me in the farm. I was both confused and scared. Suddenly, as they stopped before me, they all pulled me into a hug, congratulating me. I didn't understand what was happening, neither did my parents. After the hug, I was told that I'd gotten a scholarship from the government. They were immensely impressed with how well I did and promised to sponsor my education throughout college. They also promised a job immediately after my education. I was out of words. I stood there like a frozen chicken, not knowing what to say or do. Suddenly, my mom spoke.
Go back to the school and tell the school's principal that Zane won't be taking the scholarship. He doesn't need it.
Tell him to ask the government to give it to someone else. Our son doesn't need it. But I need it. I need the scholarship to further my education. You've both been talking about not having money to take me to college. This is an opportunity, and you want me to throw it away just like that? I was reprimanded by them, followed by a slap from my mom that sent me to the floor. My classmates had to leave. Once they were gone, I faced my parents with tears in my eyes. That scholarship was right in my grip. How could you let me lose it? They're helping us. It's not what I'm going to benefit from alone. How could you do this to me? I was in pain. I felt like my life had been destroyed. I broke down crying, but all my parents did was to grab their tools to go back to farming.
Your education ends here. We never planned to allow you to go further. When you're done crying, join us.
I was filled with rage. I'd been farming my whole life. It was a struggle for me to combine both farming and schooling, but I'd managed to do so for over 10 years. I refuse. I refuse to farm any longer. I want to go to school. I'm going to take the scholarship and go to school. My parents' eyes reddened with anger as they saw how stubborn I was about it. I stood my ground as they tried to force me to pick up my tools. I tightened my fists, refusing to grab anything. They were pulling me toward the ground, but with all of my strength, I made it hard for them. It was a real battle. My mom suddenly hit me in my back with her elbow, forcing a loud cry from my lips. I was getting weak, but I refused to let them win. The people around heard my scream. Luckily, some of them came to check where the scream came from. Seeing the scene, they quickly stepped in and freed me from my parents. How can you engage in such fights with your child? You're both so cruel.
I've always said that not everyone deserves the title of a parent. You're both irresponsible.
He's being disobedient. He initiated the fight. He threatened to kill us and tell you all that we died in our sleep. He's evil.
That's a lie. I didn't say that. It hurt how they could concoct such lies. I went ahead to explain things to everyone. In tears, I told them how my parents had planned to stop my education despite the fact that I'd been granted a scholarship to help me through my college life. I was even promised a job after college. Everyone couldn't understand why my parents didn't want me to continue schooling, despite everything being presented to me free of charge. I told everyone that I wasn't going to let go of the scholarship. Then you must choose. You either forego that scholarship and every plan to further your education, or join us and become a great farmer. Just look at us. We went to school, but the system failed us, and we never got decent jobs. Trust me, schooling won't take you anywhere. I refused the latter. Before everyone, they shamelessly asked me to go home, get my things, and leave their house. That's unfair. Where do you want a young boy like him to go?
We don't care. If he's not going to listen to us, that only means he's grown enough. And a grown man should look after himself.
We can't have a son like him in our house. He'll kill us one day. In tears, I returned home and packed a small bag. I only took what I needed and left. Firstly, I headed straight to the school where I let the principal know that I was going to take the scholarship. He was more than happy. I filled the required forms, answered a few questions, and signed in, required places before I left. The only place I could go to was my aunt's home. She lived in the next town. She used to stay with my parents after the death of her mom, who was my mom's mother. But my parents stopped her from going to school after 18. She'd run away from our home and gone to start her life alone. I'd never visited her, but I knew where she lived because I once heard my parents talking about it. When I finally got to her home and explained things to her, she was so disappointed in my parents. I was surprised to see the mansion she lived in and her 3 cars. According to her, she'd struggled hard to attain her current level after running away. She'd gone back to school after doing countless menial jobs. After hearing her story, I was determined to be like her. My aunt helped me so much. I was like her son, and she treated me so well. Luckily, the university was in the same town as the one we lived in. The years passed by quickly, and I was finally done. The job promised was given to me, and I was able to stop my aunt from working and placed her on a monthly salary. She was so elated. Unfortunately, tragedy struck 1 year later when my aunt died in her sleep. It left me so sad and hurt, as she'd played the role of parents in my whole 20 years of staying with her. I wanted to give her a befitting burial. I invited our friends and people around. After her body was cremated, I invited everyone home for us to pay her respect one last time. Shockingly, while people were walking in, I sighted my parents too. I was shocked, seeing how old and tattered they looked. I ignored and pretended as if I hadn't seen them. After the respect was given to my aunt, I began sharing expensive clothes, money, and food items to everyone around. It was the least I could do to honor my aunt. While at it, my parents suddenly approached me. I didn't act shocked or even angry. I maintained an emotionless face.
We heard you now have a good job. We're suffering, Zane. You should help us. We birthed you after all. Give us food and money, too.
The neighbors burnt down our house, set the chickens free, and let pests into our farmlands. All of that happened after rumors spread we kicked you out because we never wanted you to be educated. You owe us, Zane. No, I owe you both nothing. The neighbors did to y'all what you deserve. You're such a worthless child. Your parents sleep in a little house and can barely feed well. How can you say we deserve it?
If you don't help us, we're going to take this mansion and leave you with nothing. After all, she's my sister and I own whatever she owns.
I couldn't help but burst into laughter. They were so stupidly entitled that I'd begun to find it funny. Well, my aunt had written in her will that this house belongs to me. All of the $1 million in her account belongs to me. In fact, all of her properties are mine. Now, if you like yourselves, get out of my house before I lose my cool. They were both shocked to their bones, but still refused to leave. By now, everyone around had turned their attention to us. Someone asked who they were, and I told them. Everyone couldn't understand why I wanted them out. When I explained everything to them, including how they threatened to take the house from me, everyone insulted them for being cruel and shameless. 4 of them even stood up and helped me drag my parents outside. Just before slamming the door to their faces, I spoke to them. If either of you steps foot here again, I'm going to call the cops and report you for stalking and disturbance. Dare me. I slammed the door shut and returned to what I was doing before their arrival. They returned home to their small house, while I started a company with part of the money my aunt left me. A few months later, I heard that a snake had bitten my mom and she had died, leaving my dad suffering all alone. I didn't care, and several times he tried reaching out to me by calling, but I blocked him and even placed a restraining order against him. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.